Hey traders, Raghee here, and we're taking a look at a daily time frame of October crude oil. And crude oil took a pretty good hit today after the crude oil inventories number was released. You can take a look at that on the intraday chart shortly after 10:30. I mean, we were already heading lower, so this wasn't just a crude oil inventories number sell-off. You can see that we were selling off well before 10:30, and then it just continued after that. Now, two reasons. One, clearly anytime we have a buildup or less of a drawdown, however you want to look at it, the market's going to go ahead and sell off. But I think the bigger story is the expectation that Russia is going to talk to the Saudis and say, look, we're at about 90% of crude oil demand globally, and let's start to ease the production cuts. So there was a very quick recovery in demand. You take a look at crude oil demand. It doesn't mean that there's still not a glut out there, but the demand is getting back, and I'm certain that at the next meeting what's going to happen is the proposal is going to be for the outputs to be able to be increased. In other words, just kind of slow those cuts a bit. All right, so if you look at why Russia might propose that, basically, if you look at Russia's output in 2019 compared to 2020, and Russia's not the only country, but they're the ones that are speaking up here, and really OPEC Plus is the Russians and the Saudis. So Russia's somewhere about 10% lower production than they were in 2019. So yeah, they want to get going. So that's the narrative. What's the setup, right? Now, you might say, well, gosh, that sounds pretty bearish if they're going to increase output. But what I'm telling you isn't anything that you wouldn't be able to deduce on your own had you known that's the narrative. So we want to know the narrative, but then we want to go to price. Now, remember that whatever I just said to you, let's just presume once it's quote unquote news, once it's sitting on a website, once it's on financial television, it was probably already discounted, but it is most certainly discounted now, meaning everybody knows, and it's factored into price. So I would say most of the news, not all of it, but most of it is factored in. Now, today's sell-off took us down to the 34 EMA on the low, and it's still hovering just above the point of control for the year. Today's range also was a range of $1.92, which, that's a pretty good range. If you take a look at the historical price movement ranges, specifically for crude, you'll see $1.92. It's not a huge range. It's not like a massive, it's not as if crude oil sold off twice its typical amount. That would be closer to almost $7 even. So 1.92 on a Wednesday, it's a pretty good number, but it's nowhere even near what crude is able to do on a regular basis on a Wednesday. So please don't look at this and say, wow, that was a giant sell-off. It really wasn't. So that opens the door for two realities as far as I'm concerned. One is that we put in another lower low, and then we put in a minor low. The other is tomorrow we put in an inside candle, a harami, probably somewhere near the lower, below the lower half of this candle, something like that. Those are the two scenarios. So now we're just talking pure pattern recognition. By the way, some of you, if you've been following these conversations we're having, you remember I talked about something identical to this in bonds setting up a buy. So if you followed that conversation with the minor low that happened here, and I was thinking either we'd have this sell-off like we had with an inside candle, or we'd have a minor low. That's exactly what I'm doing. So if you're having a moment of deja vu, that's great, because that's exactly what I'm looking for again. And the cool thing is it does open up some possibilities for a day trade. If the minor low happens, it'll open up possibilities for some call options in crude if the inside day happens tomorrow. That's what I've got my eye on for this move in crude. You've got the backstory. I think a lot of that's being priced in right now, and I'll see you in the next update.